Okay, in this video we're going to talk about how you go about starting a project using references. I've already set my project by using project window and I've already gone to my preferences and make sure that everything's under everything that I'm creating is going to be under feet. Again, because I'm trying to use real world measurements. But now I need to basically figure out a good way to kind of begin this whole project. And again, in this case, we're going to be building a 3D model of the Betsy Ross house. So what I like to do, it's basically have a basic layout of the whole structure. Before I start doing any details. So this can be done in a couple ways. Without having any floor plans and having exact measurements of how everything is, one thing that I can do is kind of eyeball everything and just kind of making sure that I'm accounting for the location of each aspect of this house. But another thing that I can do, and one of the references that I have is actually a front view for it. It's actually set up this image, and if you have a front image of the one that you're trying to build, it's a good idea to take this and just set it up as your reference inside your viewport. Okay. So, and again, this method's a little more effective rather than having to eyeball everything, because the chances of you getting everything, all the proportions right, are pretty slim, and sometimes you end up creating things that are a little bit too large or not large enough, and at the end the structure that you're trying to build is not going to be the right size, and it's going to look off. So I'm gonna take this image and I'm gonna bring it into Maya. And I'm going to be using this as my reference to start building a very basic layout of of this structure. So here in my Maya viewport, I'm actually going to go to one of the orthographic viewports. And again, you can find these under panels if you go to orthographic front, or you can also use your hotbox shortcuts by holding spacebar, left clicking on the Maya, and then going to selecting front view. Okay, so this is my front orthographic viewport, and again, orthographic means it doesn't have any perspective to it. So to set up the image that I displayed before as something that I want to have in my viewport for reference, I'm going to go into view, and again, make sure you're in the front viewport. Go into view, and then go into image plane. Then click on import image. Alright, and this is going to give you this window, and now you're going to have to go to the location where you have your references. By default, it usually goes to my source images. I actually have a references folder that I created and I put into my folder structure. So I'm going to click on it, and I have this image which I titled front, and I'm just going to open it up and bring it into my scene. And again, notice that it kind of brought it in pretty small. Again, this is really gonna depend on the settings that your Maya has. You got to keep in mind that when you're working on Maya, usually you're working with millimeters, so it kind of brought it into our scene pretty small. So to resize it, I need to have an idea of how big I kind of actually want to have it. So I'm going to switch to my perspective viewport. Alright, and again, what you're seeing here, it's the camera of the front viewport projecting this image. And again, we're going to be dealing with this in a second, but I need to figure out how big I want this house to be. So I'm going to go into my shelf here, into my polygons, and I'm going to create a cube. And again, another way that you can create this is by going to create polygons. You can also click on spacebar, here, hold your spacebar and go into create, and the polygons will be there. And if for some reason you can't find the create here, it's because you might not be on the right mode. So again, if you're modeling, make sure you're under the polygon mode, because depending on which mode you are, it's going to give you different menu choices. So I'm going to go here into my hotbox, my shelf, and I'm going to click into polygon cube, and I'm going to create a polygon cube here. And I'm going to use this as kind of the basis of how big I want this house to be. So then I'm going to go into my channel box, and again, remember that this one gives you pretty much the specific attributes of your specific geometry. So if under inputs I click under polycube 1, it's going to tell me pretty much the measurements that I have right now. I actually want this house to be around 25 feet. Okay. The width, I think 17 looks good, and depth, again, I'm just going to leave it at 15 or 20. Again, this is all subject to change. All I'm doing is just a basic layout. So I'm going to go back into my front viewport, and again, just by eyeballing, I'm just going to make sure that my box is kind of resting at 0, 0, 0, which will be this black line that's right here. Okay. And I could also just kind of center and make sure that is right there. Okay. Another way that I could have done that, again, if I just go back to where I was, it's by going to your channel box and just making sure you click under the translate X and Z. We want it to be at 0, okay, and not the white one. The Y axis, we don't want it to be at 0, because if we do that, it's going to kind of bring our pivot back to this point. And again, I'm just going to show you that. So we don't want that. We actually want the box to be resting at the ground level. All right. So again, let's say that this is how big we want this structure to be. And again, this is all kind of again, just a rough layout. And again, just to make sure that I'm going to have this structure kind of facing in the right direction, again, we have this camera here. This line coming out here tells you which side it's facing, so I'm actually going to take my box and kind of move it back on the Z-axis. Okay. And I'm doing that so I can go back into my the reference image that I imported, and I can scale it up to what I want it to be. So I'm going to go into my front viewport one more time. Okay, and again, notice that we have our box right here. Also notice that we have a grid that, again, sometimes is pretty helpful when it comes to snapping and things like that. If it becomes pretty annoying to kind of have it as you're working on this, you can go to display and turn it off. Okay, that way you don't have you know, the house is already on the right location, so we don't really need the grid to position it, and that way it's just kind of easier for us to kind of know what we're looking at. So I'm gonna go here and select this image plane, and again, this is the reference that's being projected by our front camera. And you know, we have a couple of things here in the channel box that we can change, but I actually want to go into the attribute editor of this image, because it's going to make it easier for me to resize it. Now, to go to the attributes, just make sure you click on the attribute editor tab right here. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, and again, it should look something like this. I want you to go down to placement extras. Okay. And we're going to be playing with the width and height here. And again, the nice thing that doing it through the attribute editor is that we're maintaining the aspect ratio of the image. So whatever I change here is gonna pretty much make sure that it keeps it proportional to what the original image was. So we want the house to be somewhere around 25 feet. And again, notice that by just changing that, it just changed the width automatically to what it's supposed to be. And I want to bring it up and perhaps we might want to turn off our grid for this point, because again I want to make sure that it's kind of sitting on a 0 0 0, or at least the ground or the bottom of the house needs to kind of be sitting on it for references, for the purpose of references. Alright, so it's kind of sitting at 0 0 0. And if we another thing that I'm going to do right now is that I ended up putting my reference image right in front of the geometry that I'm supposed to kind of be basing it on. So I'm actually going to take this and kind of move it back a little bit, okay, like this. That way when I go back into my front viewport, I can actually see the geometry that I'm actually supposed to be kind of basing the size of it on. And you know, it looks like it needs to be a little bit bigger. Alright, so let's change the height to something like 35, and again I want to bring it up so it's resting on the 0 0 0, or you know, this black line that's on our grid. So it's just sitting right there, and it looks like it's the right height of what I had originally planned. Okay, since the moment that I created this box, it's been on wireframe mode, which is what is what geometry does by default. If we actually want to see the shaded version of it, we have to click on the shortcut number 5 on the, not on the number pad, but on the numbers that are aboard your key letters, and I press 5, and we can see that we have a shaded piece of geometry here. Now, because we need to kind of see what our geometry it's doing, and we need to be able to see our references, we're going to change the way that we're looking at our geometry here. And I want to be able to see the shaded version of it, but I also want to be able to see through it so I can see my reference. So I'm actually going to go into shading here under my viewport menu, and I want to check on the X-ray box, okay, and that's going to allow me to see a shaded version of my geometry, and it's going to allow me to see through it so I can actually kind of look at my reference. So now that I have my reference set up and I have this kind of piece of geometry that kind of started with, I can start. I'm going to go into the sub-object mode of this box and start kind of moving its components so it's matching you know, my reference here. So again, I right click on this on the box, and I'm gonna select vertices. Alright, as you can see, my vertices are kinda on right here. Okay, and what we want to do is do like a drag select around these vertices, and the reason we're doing that is because we also want to select the ones that are behind it. Alright, so by doing a drag select in the front viewport, we're going to be selecting the one that's in front and the one that's behind. So I'm going to go again into the front viewport, again spacebar, hold spacebar, left click on Maya, and then go back to front viewport, or you can find that under panels as well. So I'm going to select these vertices, and I'm going to start moving them around to kind of make them fit what I'm seeing in my reference. Okay, and again, what I'm doing right here is just basically a basic layout, something that I can kind of start with and kind of get an idea of the overall project before I start working into details. And in this case, it's just for me, it's just a better approach rather than having to start with the door and start working on details and then having to resize it to make it match what's going on here. So again, working on a basic layout of the overall projects it's a better approach than tackling each individual thing with its details. So alright, so now I have a box, and again, if it's difficult for you to see, you can also turn on the wireframe on shaded mode, which is again, if you look at your viewport menu, it's going to be this item right here, which it looks like a box with white outlines on the edges. Alright, so if you have your geometry selected and click on that, not only we're going to be able to see the X-ray shading, which we have turned on, but you're also going to be able to see the wireframe version of the geometry to make it easier for you to look at. Alright, so we have basically this box that is now representing the main body of the house. Okay. One of the things that again you kind of need to start getting used to is also the fact that when it comes to modeling, a lot of beginner modelers believe that everything should be one piece. So one of the things that we're going to be discussing is how everything kind of should be separated. Not everything needs to be one piece. Initially, I'm probably going to make the body of the house one thing, and then the roof a separate item. So again, that's just my initial assessment of this. So, and I also want to start creating some basic geometry that pretty much represents or that's a basic representation of what's going on here in the house. So I can do this in a couple ways. I can go back into my perspective. Alright, and again, this is my house right here. Probably the depth of it is a little bit too much, but again, this is just an initial assessment of it. I'm probably going to have to change it later on, but right now I want to concentrate on some of the details that I have right here. So I want to go again into my shelf right here under polygons and go into box. Okay, and I'm just going to create a box right here. Alright, and again, the purpose of this box that I'm creating here is that's supposed to kind of be a placeholder for what the door is going to be eventually. So I'm going to go into the left viewport, and I'm just going to kind of make sure that this well, let's go back to the front actually, sorry. And what I'm going to do is same method that I use on the body of the house. I'm actually going to take the vertices of this box and I'm actually going to make them fit my door, the door frame that I have right here. So I'm going to right click on the box that I created. Okay, and again, I'm kind of doing the resizing by manipulating the vertices. If you find it more comfortable to actually go into your input and polygon cube and mess with the width, height, and depth through here, you can do it there, but I just find it faster to be able to go into the sub object mode and select vertices and start moving this around. It's a much more precise and faster method. So again, I'm going into the sub object mode, selecting vertices, and I'm just drag selecting a group of vertices, because again, I'm not only selecting the front ones but also the ones that are behind, and I'm moving them around and making sure that they're fitting the store. Okay. And again, there's going to be a little bit of a difference again because our reference image has a little bit of perspective to it, but the main idea is that we'll be able to have to be able to place these objects in the right position and with the right proportion and stuff like that. Now, we don't have a reference to what the side of the door is, but I can make an assessment that it's not this thick. So I'm going to go into my left viewport right here, and I'm going to resize it through here so it's not this thick. Another thing that you can see if you change two different viewports is that we have this front camera kind of projecting a reference right here, and this can be somewhat bothersome sometimes. So if you find it annoying to have it there, you can always go to show and just check off the camera so that way we don't have to see it on the viewport. And again, notice that it's not really affecting a reference image at all. So again, I'm going to go into the left viewport just so I can resize this box so it's not so deep. So I'm going to select it, vertex, and again I'm just kind of drag selecting here multiple vertices. So I'm going to take the ones that are in the back and I'm just going to move them forward and kind of snap them to the edge of the house here, and I'm going to take this and move it back a bit. Okay, so this is how thick our door is going to be, and again, it's just an initial assessment. Once we start working on details, it's going to be a little bit different. So this is going to be basically the door frame of our house. Okay, now I want to set I want to start creating geometry that it's gonna pretty much give me an idea of what all these objects are and where they're located. Because again, uh, uh, a beginner modeler would assess this door frame and assume that this whole thing needs to be one thing. What you got to start thinking about is what's the easiest way to approaching this door frame. All right, and this is part of the initial kind of planning that you're doing here, because by looking at this, I can definitely see that the door frame itself can be one part. The frame of this kind of upper window right here can be another part, and this door is going to be a separate part. So this door frame door, it's going to be basically a three object. It's going to need a three object breakdown. So I can go into create and create another box and kind of resize it to make it fit what the door is doing. But another faster method when it comes to creating geometry, especially in something like this that is just supposed to kind of be a placeholder to what you're going to do later on, it's basically making duplicates of the geometry that you already have on your viewport. So to create a duplicate of this piece of geometry that we're going to be used to kind of sample everything else, you can go to Edit and then Duplicate, or you can use the shortcut Control D. So I'm going to select this, and I'm actually going to use the shortcut, so I'm going to do Control D. Okay, and notice that the gray X-ray that we have there actually got a little darker there, and again the reason is because there are now two of them there. Now, one of the main difference between the original piece of geometry and the clone version is that the original, it's gonna, under input, you're gonna be able to see that it still has its initial attributes. The difference between that and the clone one is that the clone one doesn't really give you that option. So on the original, you can go back and add geometry and change the width, height, and depth using the polygon cube attributes. But on the clone one, it doesn't give you those options. So that's when it becomes important to be able to know how to manipulate this the sub-object mode of this geometry. Because to resize it, rather than going into the attributes, because I don't have them, I'm gonna have to go into vertices here and just resize it myself. And again, it's pretty simple. I'm just again kind of drag selecting multiple vertices, and again remember we're using the orthographic, so we're selecting not only the front ones but the back ones, and then I'm just kind of moving them around to make it fit what my reference is showing. Alright, so that's going to be our door. And again, just to make this not so confusing, I'm going to go into my perspective, and because these two pieces of geometry are kind of occupying the same space, so if we were to look at this like that and we didn't have the X-ray on, it's going to be right behind it, and if we didn't have our wireframe, you probably wouldn't be able to see it very well. So we're just going to push it forward a little bit. So let me just kind of turn back on the X-ray and the wireframe. So I'm going to select it. Okay, then I'm going to go into the left viewport. I'm just going to move it forward, and again this is to kind of keep it organized. If we look at a reference, eventually if we look at our door, eventually there's going to be an indentation here in the frame, and the door is going to be kind of inside of that indentation. So, but we're going to get to that when we get to the details. Right now we're just doing the basic assessment of our scene here. So, and again, I'm going to create some of this detail by doing the same process. So I'm going to duplicate this box, and I'm just going to move it up, and then just resize it. I think I selected them both. Alright, and I'm just going to move it up and go into the object, sub-object mode, vertices, and just kind of resize them. Okay. And now we have we're breaking down the way that we want to go about kind of addressing our door frame here. And again, I'm going to use pretty much similar technique to kind of create the door the window frame here. and I'm going to be using this first box because it's just kind of aligned to the face of the face of the wall here. So Control D to duplicate it. Then I'm going to use my move tool to place it where it needs to be. Right click, vertex mode, and then just drag select to make sure I'm selecting all the vertices, and just resize it to where I need it to be. Alright, so that's our window frame right there, and I can also do these right here, I guess this window panels. So again, Control D, move it, and I can just resize it real quick. Alright. And again, for these window panels, I'm probably gonna have to go into my perspective, and they can't really be right next to it. They actually need to be a little bit up, so I can go into my left viewport, take that and just move it to right here. Okay. And again, just to make it easier for me, because again, this other panel is basically the same panel, I can just do Control D to duplicate it, and then just put it in the same place. Okay, I mean in the opposite place. Sorry. So I'm going to be using pretty much a similar technique to create some of the details in this house. So let me just do a couple bit more, and then we'll move on to a different type of lesson. But this is how you go about and kind of set up a basic kind of layout for your modeling project. So again, let me just go back to my front viewport, and I'm just going to create a basic kind of piece of geometry that's going to represent, whatever this piece right here. So D, gonna move it up. Let's just move it up all the way here. And again, I could make an assessment that this is probably two different pieces or just one. I'm just gonna leave it at one for now. And I'm gonna select my vertex here. Okay. Then I'm gonna take this and span it all the way to here. And again, gotta be careful with the placement, because look, there is a piece of tube kind of going up here to the side of our house here. And again, we don't want to go into details right now. We're just making a basic assessment of what's going on here. So I'm gonna kind of resize this piece of geometry, and if I look at my reference, again, it's got like a little bit of a shape. It actually comes down in this kind of triangular shape here. So I need for my basic layout to just kind of have at least some of that characteristics. So to do that, I'm gonna go into perspective. We know I'm gonna kind of change to face, just select the whole face and push it up a little bit. Okay, and we're gonna resize this face to kind of give it that triangular shape of it coming out like that. So a couple ways you can do this. You can use your scaling tool and just scale in that face like this. Alright, and then we can go into our front viewport, select that face, and then we're just gonna move this up a bit like this, and maybe just resize it a little bit more. Oops. Alright. So again, it is just supposed to be a basic representation of what's there. Again, if I were to go address these windows, again, basically they're more or less something on what we already have here. So we could technically go into a front viewport and make a copy of this. And again, I'm going to select it all, do a Control D, and just move the whole thing up. Okay. Now, and again, remember in Maya, if you want to select multiple things, you just have to make sure you have your moving tool selected. Select one and hold Shift to select the rest of them. All right. And by doing that, I had all of them selected. Did Control D, and I was able to duplicate the whole set. But again, another thing that's happening here is that it's they're not really the same size. There's a couple differences that are happening here. So, but we can still use this geometry as the basis of what's there. So, looks like our panel a little bit larger. The window size is actually correct. And again, this could be an effect of the perspective of the window. So, again, just for the sake of consistency, I'm just gonna leave everything the same size, but just gonna move it around a bit. And if I wanted to do the next one, again, using my selection tool, I'm gonna shift select the rest of them, do a Control D, move it over. Okay. And so on and so forth, with a lot of details that you have here. And again, for some of these details, you might have to maybe apply a couple different techniques. Not everything can be done with a cube. For instance, another thing that I want to have on my layout is basically the cylinder that goes up right here. So you would use a different type of primitive for that. But I'll probably start with a square just for the bottom part here. Okay. And probably have to make this a little bit thicker, like that. And then the next thing I would do is select the cylinder here. Alright. And you want to just use your moving tools and just kind of place it in the right location. Alright. Just gonna eyeball that for now. And then we will go into the input so we can look at the different settings of this primitive, and we'll probably change the radius of it to something that's not so thick. And again, I'm doing that. I'm doing the changing the parameters here by selecting the actual parameter of it, and then I'm going into the viewport and I'm middle mouse dragging. Okay. So again, I want to go into my front viewport just so I can get the right circumference here, and it looks like it's just a little bit smaller. And again, if it makes it easier for me just to go in here and just do it by hand, I can do that. Alright, something like that. So it's gonna sit right there, and then we're just gonna have to change the height. And again, we're not concerned with I can use the height right here, but again, one of the things that happens with this is that it changes the height based on the location of the pivot. So it's going to be doing that. So again, if it's easier for you just to go to the component and just move the vertices around, you can do that. Alright. Okay. And again, I can use the same technique to just basically create a basic kind of piece of geometry that represents all of these. Okay, so I'm gonna stop this video right now, and again, just use the techniques that that I've been showing here to just create a basic layout of your house. And then in the next video, once we have a pretty basic geometry of everything that I'm building, we're gonna start working on some of the details. Alright, so this concludes this video, and thank you for